If you call yourself a wrestling fan and don't know Antonio Inoki, perhaps you're not as intensely nerdy as we are. He founded New Japan Pro Wrestling in 1972, which is the second largest wrestling company in the world. He's a big deal in wrestling. He's kind of a big deal in Japanese politics too. Inoki founded the Sports and Peace Party and was elected to the Japanese House of Councillors in 1989. That's kind of like their Senate. Inoki's Sports and Peace Party wanted to incorporate the spirit of sports into politics, alleviating human frustrations and inadequacies through proper health maintenance. With that clarity, traditional bureaucratic cobwebs could be beaten out, and Japan could usher in an era of grassroots proactivity. It just so happened that during Inoki's term in office, it was peak Saddam crazy time in Iraq. On the 2nd of August 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, seriously pissing off the West and acting as a catalyst for the Gulf War. Hussein was holding thousands of foreigners hostage. Among them were around 140 Japanese citizens. They were scattered across the country at strategically significant locations in order to deter international attack, essentially making them human shields. Inoki naturally engaged in some grassroots proactivity, making his first trip over to Iraq on his own dime in September of 1990 in order to personally negotiate the release of the Japanese hostages. Inoki met with Saddam's son Uday, whose greatest international fame came in 2003 when he was shot to death along with his brother Hussein during a 4-hour shootout with American forces in Mosul. Inoki brought with him kimonos and those electric dancing flowers that were super cool in 1990. For a man who was thought to have owned around 1,200 luxury vehicles, it may have been a bit underwhelming. Nevertheless, it did open up a dialogue that led to even more unsanctioned trips to Iraq for Inoki, in which he'd convert to Islam, adopting the given name of Mohammed Hussein. Inoki's negotiations, along with those of former Japanese Prime Minister Yasuhiro Nakasone, were quite strongly frowned upon by most of the international coalition forming in opposition of Iraq's actions. Broadly, it had been agreed, as Margaret Thatcher put it, not to go wobbly on Saddam Hussein, and thus flatly refuse any form of official negotiation.
An aggressor cannot gain from his aggression. He must be thrown out, and really, by that time in my mind, I thought we ought to throw him out so decisively that he could never think of doing it again.
That opinion softened a little bit at the beginning of November after the Iraqi news agency credited Nakasone's appeal for the agreed release of the majority of the Japanese hostages. No doubt energized by the developments, Inoki continued to push for the release of the remaining Japanese citizens. And he went all out. On November 30th, Inoki set out to Iraq with family members of the remaining 41 in an effort to guilt their way to freedom. And if that wasn't enough, Inoki also brought with him Japanese rock stars, soccer and basketball teams, karate and judo experts, traditional taiko drummers, and professional wrestlers working for New Japan Pro Wrestling. Inoki held what was dubbed a peace festival. The whole thing fit the ideology of his political party pretty snugly. Bring people together through sport. Also traditional drummers and rock music. Because what's steak without a bit of sizzle? Anyway, the whole thing was welcomed by Saddam Hussein, who saw it as a positive bit of PR. He himself had invited the families of the captives to visit. Hussein wanted to show the world that he too wanted peace, and that people were only being held because they prevented Western powers from shifting to full-blown warfare. A spokesman for the United States Department of State said of the invite, "We discourage travel. We consider it a risk and we don't think it helps. Saddam Hussein's playing with hostages is just cynical manipulation of people, and we don't think that people should be involved in it. Some people have gotten out and we always welcome that. We are happy to see people free, but we continue to discourage travel by family members." Inoki's a man who thinks outside the box though, And so on December 2nd and 3rd, a month and a half before the start of Operation Desert Storm, he held his peace festival at Al-Sha'ab Stadium, Baghdad. The family members were prominently featured on camera during the show, openly weeping, presumably fearing that no significant progress had been made in the proposed release of their loved ones. Indeed, all seemed lost by December 4th as Inoki and his festival crew waited for their plane at the humbly named Saddam International Airport. In the 11th hour, Inoki's host rushed into the airport to ask him to stay for a few more days in order to further discuss the release of the Japanese hostages. Visibly moved, Inoki accepted the offer. Inoki once again held talks with Uday Hussein, who said he'd received a special order from his father to release the remaining 41 Japanese hostages. He even apologized to Inoki for holding the hostages for so long. The day after that, Daddy Hussein announced plans to release all of the remaining foreigners. Encouraged by his success, Inoki has continued to make independent trips to places such as North Korea and Pakistan, where he offered to mediate talks between the Taliban and the Pakistani government, saying, "I feel bad seeing Muslims fighting each other, which is why I decided to travel to Pakistan and offer my services in facilitating talks. If someone wants to fight, he should do it inside a ring." The offer was dismissed. However, Inoki's peace brokering has arguably chipped away at some North Korean iciness. The 1995 Peace Festival he held there purportedly attracted 165,000 people for day 1 and 190,000 for day 2, making the combined attendance 355,000, which is the most attended wrestling event of all time. There were a lot of foreigners on the card that night, including Americans, and inarguably some small fragment of peace through sport was felt. Did you enjoy that? Let us know in the comments section. And please, like and subscribe if you want more.